All right, guys, so we got some news today about an Oregon school district banning the Black Lives Matter and the pride flag. Well, that's at the very least how the liberal media frames it, because it's a little bit more complicated than that, okay? But it's one of those things that I think this conversation is necessary, because the woke revolutionaries that are running these schools seem to be in favor of certain political speech, but they're not in favor of other types of political speech that they don't like, okay? And in my opinion, you can't have it both ways, okay? Either people can say whatever they want, right, in terms of political opinion, express their political opinion regardless of what it is, regardless of whether you like it or not, or you can't, right? That's just kind of how it goes, right? And this Oregon school district here is really kind of putting this to the test. So let's read here. An Oregon school district voted Tuesday to ban Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ, and other political signs, flags, and articles of clothing from their campuses. After hearing from a fraction of community members who have opinions on the subject, the Newberg Public Schools board voted 4-3 to keep any sort of political signage out of schools. So if you look this up, right, and you see all the left-wing news articles about this, they're going to say this school district banned Black Lives Matter and pride flags. They're bigots, right? Bigots. Except they actually banned all political signage, right? They want all political signage out of school, which, again, like I said, you can have all of it or you can have none of it. That's just kind of how it goes, okay? And we all know how the left has felt about Trump flags and Trump signage. We know how students have faced issues with that, right? Getting kicked out of online class because they have a Trump flag or whatever, or because they're wearing, paraphernalia that the left doesn't like, okay? So, look, like I said, it can be all of it or it can be none of it. The board will later decide what counts as political. The board would later decide what counts as political, but pride flags and BLM messages were repeatedly referenced during the meeting. Hey, man, it says everything is political. I hope that they include everything. I really do. I'm trying to be consistent on this, right? Unlike the left. Superintendent Joe Morlock said he will have to meet with the district's lawyers before enforcing the ban. I won't be able to enforce it as it is until we have gone through a bunch of legal review, he said. And that makes sense, okay? That makes sense. It's probably is a lot of legal technicalities and things that have to go along with this. School board director and vice president Brian Shannon, who voted for the measure and added the language about apparel, said the main goal of this is to get political symbols and divisive symbols out of our schools so we can focus on the already difficult task of educating our students in the core subjects. I 100% agree with this. I really do. Right? In my ideal world, honestly, guys, when it comes to public schools, I wouldn't have any political language, right? Whether that's on the right or the left. I would not have any political signage or anything like that. I mean, unless, again, there's a school club is specifically about, a certain political group or whatever. Obviously, you do have like young Republicans clubs and young Democrat clubs and stuff like that. I kind of get it for that. Right, but when we're talking about like actual like in classroom learning, like why do you need a Black Lives Matter flag in the classroom, right? Why do you need a pride flag in the classroom? Okay, we've seen woke teachers put up Black Lives Matter and pride flags in classrooms and basically try to make that a part of their whole thing. Okay, I've shown this before on my channel. There are teachers doing that, and I don't think that's necessarily right, because these are political movements, and you're pushing your political opinions on students at that point. That's what teachers are doing. That's what it's about, right? It's not about, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. I think if students want to wear a political shirt, they want to wear a Trump shirt, you want to wear a Black Lives Matter shirt, I don't care. I just don't think teachers should be putting up, a ton of paraphernalia and pushing a political agenda on students. That's just me, right? The apparel rule will only apply to staff while they are working. Again, that makes sense. Board member Brandy Penner counted that the top 5 performing schools in the state had diversity coordinators and diversity statements, while the district that was struggling educationally have a lack of anything to do with equity. Okay, whatever. Quote, this feels so draconian. This feels so anti-everything, Penner said. Anti-free speech, anti-free expression, anti-safety. This is not about free speech. Nobody's stopping students from having their own type of speech. But do you really think that our educators, our public school teachers should be able to push a political message on students? I don't agree with that. Like, even if the teacher, right, put up a Trump flag and try to push Republican and conservative propaganda on students, I wouldn't agree with that either. I wouldn't agree with that. I don't agree with, I just don't think teachers should be pushing political messages on students. Board member N.S. Penner also pointed out that students weren't given enough of a say in the decision, even though they and their parents have shared stories detailing discrimination and feeling unsafe. Quote, the quality of some of the stories that we heard should count more than just the number of emails that we received, said Penner, who was wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt and a rainbow band head during the virtual meeting. And I feel like that's not being heard. The students are not being heard. When does the students typically have a say in terms of school policy? I mean, let's be real here, right? I mean, look, at the end of the day, man, like, Black Lives Matter, pride flags, whatever, it's all political. Why do you want that in the classroom? That distracts from learning. It really does. The board was also expected to work on replacement language for the school's anti-racism policy and consider re-examining the Oregon Department of Education's Every Student Belongs policy, which in part prohibits hate symbols, specifically 3 of the most recognizable symbols of hate in the U.S., the swastika, the Confederate flag, and the noose. Wait, hold on now. Look, I don't agree with any of those symbols, okay? I don't agree with any of those symbols, what they stand for. But, I mean, listen, if we're going to talk about free speech, I mean, that's technically free speech too, okay? So how is it that there's some political signage that you can have and then there's some that you can't, right? Because I will argue that, you know, BLM flag or whatever, that can be anti-cop, right? That can be anti-cop. That can represent hate towards police officers, okay? I can argue that, right? So again, I mean, again, you either want free speech or you don't, right? You can't have free speech that you agree with and then say, oh, well, you know, if you don't like the free speech that we agree with, then you're anti-free speech. Yeah, you can't have it that way, right? If you want free speech, then everything has to be allowed if that's what it's truly about. Otherwise, it's not about free speech. It's about pushing your political agenda. It's about pushing messages that you think are acceptable. And I think that's what a lot of these, you know, people that are pushing back against this policy, that's what it's coming from. Because again, there's some symbols that they don't want, right? Like again, if it was a Trump flag, that's a symbol of hate. That's a symbol of hate, right? And they would want to ban that. We've seen students be kicked out of online classrooms because of that. But oh no, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, a pride flag, oh no, that's free speech. That's free speech. But it's not free speech if it's a Trump flag. Or if it's anything having to do with right-wing movement. I say, listen, you either allow all of it or you allow none of it. So we will see if this stands, okay, in terms of the legality of it. We will see if it even is something they can even enforce. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.